Welcome back. We're having a wonderful chat, not chat, just a great conversation with John O'Sullivan. During the break, you were saying that you just had a book signing recently where you had a surprise guest.
Yes, well, in London, when we launched the book, Lady Thatcher very kindly agreed to come to the party. Not only did she come, but she said she would sign. I mean, I was signing the books, so she said she would sign the books as well. So, of course, everybody bought a book.
Of course they did. And did you bring me one? I love it. I love it. One of my family names is Thatcher. So,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
One of her family names is O'Sullivan.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, I discovered that when I was working for her in Downing Street, and I wrote her a note saying, you know, you should tell people this, because the Irish vote generally goes Labour. I think a lot of people might change their mind if they knew this.
If they knew, they'd change their tune. That's great. That's fabulous. I wanted to talk a little bit about Pope John Paul now. Why were the Soviets so intimidated about having a Polish Pope?
Well, first of all, they knew from their experience of dealing with him in Poland what a clever and shrewd opponent he was, because he didn't take them head on. He went around them and found ways of expressing spiritual freedom and liberty, which they found hard to deal with. But then they also knew that their position in Eastern Europe was much more fragile. It looked terribly strong on the surface, superficially, but it was fragile. And they knew that the ordinary people were against them, and that if you had a strong spiritual leader in the Catholic Church as a world figure, that would have consequences they simply couldn't predict. By the way, they tried to. The moment he was elected, Andropov ordered all the think tanks in Moscow to produce reports on how they can best deal with this. But the fact was, they never found a way of dealing with the Pope, and he began the spiritual unraveling of the Soviet Union.
And he could really, the common man and the common woman really identified with him. And I think at one point you said that one woman said, see, he really understands who we are.
Well, that's right. And when he went to Poland, which was the beginning of his great campaign, in June 1979, a third of the Polish nation turned out in person to hear him say Mass and to speak and deliver sermons. Now, a third of the whole Polish nation is a phenomenal figure. And somebody asked a miner, you know, an ordinary working man, why he was there, and he said, "I'm here for two purposes: to do honor to the Mother of God and to spite those bastards, namely the communists." And of course, he did both. The Pope, in a way, undermined communism. In the year after his visit, the Solidarity was founded. It became a great national movement. It became such a powerful movement, the communists had to bring in martial law to try to suppress it, which they never could do.
So he was really the impetus to start the Solidarity movement within
I think that's
Soviet Union.
Oh, absolutely right. Solidarity movement, a movement, by the way, which obviously spread through Poland and then to the rest of the Soviet bloc in different ways. But of course, that movement was kept alive under martial law, not just by the Pope, but also by Ronald Reagan, because he directed the CIA, he dealt with the labor unions in America, the AFL-CIO, and with the church to deliver equipment, radio equipment, money, the method of keeping an underground movement going. And in effect, this terrified the Soviets, because they were overstretched, their empire was failing, and here all of a sudden you have a successful rebellion at the very heart of the Soviet empire in Eastern Europe, which the Americans and the Pope together, and Mrs. Thatcher too in her way, were undermining.
Right, and as far as the Pope is concerned, what do you think the relationship was with, or the conversation between he and Reagan in that closed door 50, 60-minute conversation that went on?
Well, he came out and he said to two cardinals, Reagan is a man of peace. He's a genuine disarmer. He wants to bring peace to the world. He wants to get rid of nuclear weapons. Now, a year after that, Reagan announced Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative. There was a huge campaign against this in Western Europe, and orchestrated also by the Soviets. They tried to involve the Pope. the Pope would have nothing to do with it. In fact, it's believed that he effectively suppressed hostile reports in the Vatican about the Strategic Defense Initiative, and it's well known, of course, that he persuaded the Catholic bishops to moderate their criticism of the Reagan's foreign policy and defense policy. So that meeting was very, very important, and it effectively established a kind of de facto alliance between the United States and the Vatican. No conspiracy, but a coincidence of interests. They were both against communism. They both wanted to help the Poles. They both wanted to ensure that the world didn't blow up in a nuclear explosion.
Right. President Reagan, with the SDI program, Strategic Defense Initiative, really believed that that was essential to bring into power so there would be a balance of nuclear weapons, so we wouldn't have a madman that would appear someday as we are seeing today.
Well, as a matter of fact, that is exactly right, and it's not a point. It's a point that very few people have grasped. But at the Reykjavik summit, he has a one-on-one conversation with Gorbachev, and Gorbachev is saying, "Look, we're getting rid of nuclear weapons, so what do you need a strategic missile defense for?" Right. And Reagan says, "Well, yes, we're getting rid of nuclear missiles and weapons, but we're not getting rid of the knowledge of how to make them, and we can't ever disinvent that." It could be that our two countries would have no defences, and some lunatic would come along, get control, a Hitler of a major state or a terrorist group, and they would develop these weapons, and we would have no defence against them. Now, Reagan is there describing the situation of today with eerie precision, and that's something which I think many of the experts who've discussed this question before have never really grasped.
Right, right. And what do you think he would have done today, be it after 9/11? Would he have gone into Afghanistan? Would he have gone into Iraq? What would Reagan have done?
Well, I always say when I'm asked a question like this, we don't really know this because Reagan isn't around to tell us. But having said that, and I've thought about it a lot, I would say the following. After September the 11th, I believe he would have invaded Afghanistan. Pretty well, everybody wanted to do so, and he certainly would not have accepted a challenge to American power of that kind without taking some action. Iraq, that's more difficult to judge because he was extremely cautious and used American power very sparingly, and when he did use it, he used it with great effect. So what I would say there is, he probably would have invaded Iraq. We can't be certain, but if he did, he would have done so with enough troops and with enough preparation for the immediate post-war period to ensure a more successful operation. Why do I say that? Because when he was invading Grenada, he told the officers in charge to double the number of troops involved, because if Jimmy Carter had done the same thing in the Desert One rescue operation, Reagan said, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair now.
Interesting how he learned from history. And the final quote in your book, the eulogy of Margaret Thatcher at President Reagan's funeral was?
Well, yes, this is what she said was, we have one advantage that Ronald Reagan never had. We have his example. And that, I think, is a very powerful quote. Right. But also, I thought, very moving, too, was when she said, Ronnie's last years were clouded by illness. That cloud has now lifted. Because that was a religious affirmation of a belief in a better life, which I think that Reagan certainly had, and which guided him in many of his actions.
I think so, too. I think we were very blessed to have the three of them together at that time. And I do think that they are three who changed the shape of our world. I truly do believe that, and I thank you so much for writing the book.
Oh, thank you.
I would like to find out what is coming up next for you. I know you said you're going to Los Angeles, and where will you go after that?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I'm going from Los Angeles. I go to Seattle and San Francisco, and then next week we're launching the book in Canada, and I'm going to Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Ottawa, everywhere really. And I used to live and work in Canada, and I like the country very much, and I have many friends there, so I'm hoping the book will do well.
I'm sure it'll do fantastic. It'll do wonderful. And if you wouldn't be in the career you're in now, what would you be doing?
Well, of course, I did try to get into politics as a young man and ran for Parliament, actually. But I'm going straight now, and But in fact, I rather regret I didn't go into your business, because I love the theatre, I love show business. I'm a writer, of course, not a performer, but I wish that I'd devoted some time to, say, writing for the theatre, or perhaps even getting a job as an assistant stage manager, and making sounds like thunder when it's required off stage.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll make you a deal. The next book you write, I'll read it as I have and devour it, because for me, I love the political side right now. And you can come on out dancing. How's that?